Welcome everyone to our Food for Thought speaker series. We've been running our speaker series since the summer and we're happy to have you all with us. Today we have our distinguished panel on creating food secure communities, a view from leaders in the fight against hunger. And we're honored to have our distinguished guests, Lisa Heinz-Johnson, Dr. Melanie Samuels, and Linda Good-Bryant. And now I'll hand it off to Bill, who will do an amazing introduction of our distinguished guests. So thank you. Oh, and also, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We will be reviewing those questions, and please keep yourself on mute so we can focus on our wonderful panel. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, for being the driving force. You and Valerie have really made this series go week after week after week. It's a lot of work. It doesn't show up till actually the presentations happen, but I think it's been invaluable for our community. So thank you for that. I'd be absolutely head over heels thrilled to have any one of our three panelists for our series. To have all three in one day is just amazing. So thank you all. And I don't want to take too much of your precious time, but just let me say a couple of things. One, this is a topic that it's truly the life or death aspect of the terrible things that we've been living with for a long time. There, your long-term health consequences and work and jobs and all these things are, I don't mean to diminish them, but if you don't eat, you don't live. And for many people, this pandemic has really threatened their ability to survive. And folks like our expert panelists are been working day after day after day for year after year after year to deal with hidden crisis, not just in the world, but here in the United States, in the richest country in the world. It's hard to believe that so many people, millions of people, go to bed hungry. Millions of children go to bed hungry every night pre-pandemic. So this is an issue that requires tremendous amount of attention. And it's an issue for me that's so important because it's something we can do something about, and do it every day and do it really to reduce waste. I mean, what ultimately becomes waste and pollution is food if we get to it a little bit earlier. So our three panelists are experts who have been working on this issue for many years very successfully. And our chairperson of our panel and our family member and friend for many, many years. She's so young and beautiful. It's hard to believe that I've known her for 2 decades. So, but she was only 12 when I met her. So Lisa Heinz-Johnson is the former COO of the Food Bank of New York City. We've worked together here at Columbia University. She's been a speaker in my classes for many, many years. She's a brilliant person. She's a kind and gentle person. And she's a leader. And she's gathered 2 people who are her peers in every respect of what I just said, focused on this critical problem. So rather than jabber any longer, let me turn today's event over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate that awesome introduction. I can always count on you to lift my spirits. Beautiful and young. Good job. So I want to thank you and your team at SEPA for the invitation to speak on what is a very important topic. It's one that I certainly hold near and dear to my heart, and not just because I led at Food Bank for New York City for over 8 years as its chief operating officer, but because I have personal experience with it growing up in the Bronx and in a community that didn't have many nutritious and affordable options for maintaining a healthy diet. And watching my mother, who I now understand had a pretty heavy load to bear, I watched her go to work every day in the younger part of my growing up. And then one day she just was no longer going to work. And I would later come to find out that she lost her job as she had really debilitating health issues. And while we never went hungry, and I believe that I had the best childhood there was to have in spite of any struggles we endured, my mother made sure of that. there were some tough times while we were on public assistance, and those food stamps ran out at the end of the month. And again, as a parent, I now can understand and appreciate the tough decisions she had to make between paying rent, between paying the electric bill, between buying food, and just all of the things that you have to juggle when you're a parent. And the mental, physical, and emotional impact of that is real. You fast forward to today, and in just looking at our country, the United States, according to Feeding America, has 1 in 9 people that struggle with hunger. And in New York City alone, 1.4 million New Yorkers rely on emergency food programs such as food pantries and soup kitchens. How is this possible? And what can we collectively do about it, right? That's the basis of today's discussion. But I don't think that we can defeat an issue or even deal with it if we don't define it. So just allow me to share some brief definitions with you. I'm gonna share my screen, and hopefully this actually works out with you. Let's see if it comes up. One second. All right, here we go. So,
You got it.
you're up, can you see?
Yep.
Okay. So, food security. It's the state of having reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable and nutritious food. Food justice is a holistic and structural view that the food system that sees healthy food as a human right and addresses the structural barriers to that right. And quite honestly, I would add that anything contrary to the above places people in food insecure and food unjust situations that are detrimental to our ability to live full lives. And everyone should care about that. So I'm gonna go right back to our chat here. I wanna now bring in my two partners here, as they're not just working in food insecure communities, they're working with community to address food hunger and food injustice. Dr. Samuels and Ms. Linda Goodbryan are just so incredibly knowledgeable and are engaging in work that is meaningful and impactful. And I'm grateful to the two of them for being with me here today. They are truly the experts here. And as they know, I have a number of questions that I'll be posing to facilitate our conversation. And we'll leave some time for Q&A toward the end of our discussion. But I'm not gonna read bios. You guys have that information. I wanna make sure we focus on the conversation at hand. So I'm actually gonna go right into our first question, because you'll learn a lot about who they are and what they do in the midst of our conversation. So the first question is for the both of you, Dr. Samuels and Ms. Linda, but let's start with Dr. Samuels first. So I provided some definitions of food security and food justice, but let's start with what food insecurity looks like in the communities that you serve. And what are some of the short and long-term effects of food insecurity on the individuals and families in your communities? You're on mute, Dr. Samuels.
There we go. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to the panel. And of course, thank you for the invitation, Lisa. It's been great knowing you and have seen the tremendous work you've done at the food bank, and still you're continuing to let your voice be heard. And so it's a great opportunity. And I was really touched by your story about the topic when you asked the importance, how important it is for you. The topic is so important to you, and it is important to me, as you can imagine, coming from a third world. I know, coming from a third world country, seeing hunger and food insecurity there, hopping over into America, into New York City, coming in and actually seeing that a wealthy country, never thought, you heard about the country of opportunities, and actually seeing that it is here also. And that's where I would answer your question about food insecurity. And to simply put it, it's an ugly picture. It's not a sight that one wants to behold or treasure. Food insecurity has been, for me, after my years and experience as an executive director for the Campaign Against Hunger, and watching families. And when I say families, I want to just break that down, because we've gotten your definition, which is so true. I wanted just to break it down so others can understand. It is me looking at seniors and veterans and students, college students, some that are participating right now, poor working families, and the disabled, but more so our children, unable to access healthy, affordable food from simply, which is a right for every family to do. So food insecurity for me, it's where we as a community have to do or make changes because it's necessary. And it's needed now for us to move to another level where we can make sure family access healthy food, affordable food, but more so sufficient food. And as we know that many of our families, and we'll talk later about that, are actually being affected because of food injustice. We are seeing too much of that, and it's heart-wrenching, as I said before. And many of the issues that are causing this food insecurity is the lack of affordable housing, the inability for one to pay for their co-payment, chronic health disease, and acute illnesses have derived from that. The cost of medical, their medical costs, low wages, loss of healthy food because of gentrification. And even though gentrification brings food into some communities, we still find that it's a neighborhood design just to make sure that only certain people have access, that have a certain income that can afford food. So food insecurity to me is where so many are left out of what could have been different.
Thank you so much, Dr. Samuels. I'm going to invite Ms. Linda Goodbryant to add to that question from your perspective and the work that you do.
Remembering to take off the to be audible takes a second. Anyway, I also want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be in this conversation today, and especially you, Lisa. Thank you. You know, I started Project EATS while I was working as an independent documentary filmmaker, and it was 2008. And in 2008, there was a global food crisis. And it was a crisis that was caused when there was a sudden increase in food prices globally. And what that meant for people who lived on limited incomes was that they were faced with not being able to buy food. At the time, I decided I'd do a web series that chronicled the impact of the global food crisis on Americans, but also throughout the world. And I came across some news footage that I was editing that was taken in the city of Port-au-Prince in Haiti, where people were forced to eat mud pies spiked with small pebbles and honey to stave off their sense of hunger and starvation. And as I was cutting that footage, it occurred to me, what kind of world do we live in if people are forced to eat mud pies because they cannot afford the cost of food? And it was in that moment that I decided that all of us should be able to grow our own food in the communities that we live in. And even if we live on concrete, as we do here in New York City. And that was the moment that I put my camera aside and began to focus on starting Project EATS, which is an effort to create food systems, community-based food systems throughout the city. When I think about food insecurity, I first have to just, even to respond to that, I have to say that I find it to be an inaccurate description of what it is. The reason that people are not food secure is a deliberate act of power and force that makes the majority of people, the majority of all of us, dependent on a few for the things that are essential for our survival, such as food. And it's all based on the ability to purchase. And if you don't have the ability to purchase, then you're going to have less. And in times of crisis, that less becomes you're going to have very little to survive on. What does it look like in the communities that we work in? And we've created community-based farms, which are the foundation of the food systems we're creating. We've created about 20 in New York City since 2009. And in each community, it takes a form that includes having limited to no access to fresh, nutritious food, which we have to have in order to be healthy. Physically healthy, we have to be able to have access to and consume nutritious food. It means not having sufficient income to purchase that food. It means not having the ability to grow that food in the communities where we live for any number of reasons, from the way land is classified and its uses are defined and determined by legislation, to not having access to the capital necessary to buy land that one could farm on in the city. It also means eating food that makes our bodies sick, for the most part. And that ailment, and the illnesses that we get from not being able to eat food that allows us to be healthy, prevents our ability to physically thrive. And I suspect it also prevents our ability to use the other qualities of human life to survive and thrive as well. But that's what it looks like.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to absolutely touch on two terms that you both used in just a moment. I've written them down so I don't forget them. But I want to bring in some data that I think is important for those on watching this to hear and understand. So to frame even where we are post-COVID, and I use post, lightly, but before COVID, more than 35 million people struggled with hunger in the United States, including more than 10 million children. The pandemic obviously has meant the loss of millions of jobs. And as a result, more than 54 million people, including now 18 million children, may experience food insecurity in 2020. Now with COVID impacting the communities that you serve, what are you seeing? Clearly there were lines, there were things, but how has it further exacerbated your ability to serve? Dr. Samuels, you were talking earlier about the need to, before the call started, the need to secure a warehouse for the additional food and resources that you were bringing in, and now you've lost that warehouse. But what does that mean to your community? What does that look like? And how can people help with that?
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Just to give you an idea of who we were pre-COVID-19, we were actually serving 250 families per day. Now, since COVID-19, we have served in the last 6 months 350,000 families. We have infused 8.6 million meals. You are correct. Because of the unemployment, it's an unprecedented number of individuals that are coming. We have built partnership of 250 partners on the ground as one of the most robust emergency feeding program in the city, the Campaign Against Hunger. Immediately when COVID hit, we began to use whatever resources we had, which was a few, and begin to engage as many as we could, because the lines were wraparound, as you expressed. we were seeing 1,000. It was not unlikely to see 1,000 individual online, but we understood that's not the best way that we could fight this hunger situation that we were fighting. And with the COVID and the social distance, we had to begin to think out of the box. It could not be the same way as it was before. We could not put the plan in action or the design that we had or was given down earlier on how to fight hunger the best way. It was now using all your intuition and putting that in place. And as a mom, it's like, okay, my children are in need. What would I do? So it's moving, it's setting a charge where how can we best reach? So what we did, and we were like the trailblazer in this, we began not only curbside, everyone moved to curbside, but we began to look at organizations, shelters. How can we get the food to the shelters? How could we get it to the senior centers? How could we get it to the children? We already had a relationship with the Administration for Children's Services. It was time now to engage them in another way. So just bear in mind, somewhat of limited resources, the campaign against hunger, limited resources and everything, but we just trusted that we could do this. Our staff understood the mission that was given to us, and the success of it is that we have been able to engage so many families, distribute so many food, volunteer hours, over 10,000 volunteer hours in 6 months. And we were able, and I saw that we were making a difference, but not just food, because it's one thing to put anything in a bag, but we wanted to make sure that it was still nutritious, because we are looking at a pandemic that is attacking the immune system. We wanted to fight this. So what we had to do is, what we started is great. It's continuing because unemployment is on, there's so many unemployed individuals that needs food, at-risk children, school programs shattered because many were not coming out. And so we had to do something. Now, as an organization, we look at where we are. We are in a space that we have to leave. And then I said to someone recently on CNN, can you imagine we're gonna be homeless in a few weeks, because someone was gracious enough to give us a space for 3 months. We thought it was a 3 months, in 3 months, pandemic is gone, everyone restored to normalcy. But now we are hearing the word, the new norm. Our children is at home, and still we have to get the food that is necessary into their hands. So the campaign against hunger right now is in a challenging position where 14,000 families are depending on us each week, and we don't know where we're going to go yet. We have not solidified a warehouse space. We know we cannot go back where we are, because it cannot be reversed. So we're just trusting and believing by faith that something miraculous is about to happen. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's where we are right now. It's a tough time, but we're moving with whatever resources we have.
Makes total sense, and thank you. You know, you make the best with what you have, but obviously the one thing you cannot do is be paralyzed in the situation, and so you look for partners, as you did, to help move what needs to be done along. And so I want to also engage Ms. Linda Goodbrien in this conversation as well, in this particular question. How has this now layer of COVID, this pandemic, impacted your work? We can't hear you.
Hopefully third will be a charm. Third time will be a charm. Anyway, I want to put this within the context of the society we live in, because I think it is the society that we live in that is creating the conditions for the things that Dr. Samuels and you have both spoken about to occur. And it's due to a social, economic, and opportunity inequalities that exist here in the US, which is a financially rich country. We've had to respond in in creative and resourceful ways to the impact of COVID in the communities that we're in. And one of the ways that we did that was that we reshaped our farm program where we grow food and we make that food available in communities at income appropriate prices, and subsidize that by food we sell into commercial food markets and to market rate customers outside the community. What we did was we reshaped that activity so that the food we were growing, we were able to provide to residents for free to ensure that they had fresh, just picked, nutritious food available as a part of their meal selections. We also began delivering food directly, which required us developing a volunteer force. We had a small one before, it's gotten much larger relative to that, so that there were people that were delivering to the doors of seniors, to the homes of residents who are living in temporary shelters in the communities we're in, and also to residents specifically who are undocumented or considered illegal, who have trouble being able to get food through other means. So we were delivering direct to them, so we bypassed those restrictions that the obstacles they faced. The other thing that we did was that we had to develop partnerships that we would never have thought of partnering. And one of the partnerships, which reunited Lisa and me, was with the Food Bank of New York City. And that was tough. I mean, when we were trying to find food banks that would help us also supplement our fresh food bags with canned and packaged and shelf-safe food, the food banks were like, but you're a farm, you're outside, you're not a pantry, pantries are indoors. It was like, the response was really, was mind-bending for me. But anyway, the fact of the matter is the Food Bank of New York came on board as a partner with us, and we've been able to provide that along with the fresh vegetables that we provide to residents. We also began to look at farms upstate and identify those farms who had food because of COVID and what was happening in terms of their operations of farms. They had food they had started growing and needed they had more of, which goes to a comment that was made earlier today in this conversation. But anyway, and so we were able to get several of them to start bringing food to us, to Manhattan, so that food could be distributed. And what was really great about that was that we were able to provide people with fresh, very, very fresh poultry and meat products, which I dare say the residents really like from these farms. So yeah, we also started fundraising online, which was something we hadn't done as an organization. So this has more to do with us as an organization than it has to do with, you know, the impact on the community, though the online contributions were a tremendous help. You know, all of a sudden our programming changed. So the funds we usually get for programming had to change too. and I'm very happy to say there were nonprofit organizations, particularly arts organizations. And I think in part because of the ties that we have in the art world, volunteers and donors started to come from there that have helped to keep us afloat during this period. So it's been good. We are small. So when I say we're small, we have 4 production farms. We are operating 8 farms right now. 4 of those are production farms. Our largest is just shy of 2 acres. The others are about 1/4 of an acre each. 2 are on the roof, another one's on the ground. There's a 1/2 acre on the ground. So, you know, we're working right now with about, you know, 3.5, 4 acres of land. But we are serving between 500 and 600 families, households, individuals each week in Brooklyn, the Lower East Side, and the Bronx.
Thank you for that. Yes, Dr. Samuels.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also, because of the pandemic, again, Linda, appreciate what you've said. But the thing is that we have to look at what can we do now. And I just wanted to bring it on the perspective that the pandemic really just amplified the situation. Let us know all the voices that we've been saying years ago that the Black and Brown community is at risk, is at risk. We have been championing that, and no one has listened for how long. And so I know the food justice movement have been saying, listen, we need to do different in the Black and Brown communities because they're the ones that have been affected the most. And so for so many years, we've been crying out. And what the pandemic did, it was a show and tell. It was said, okay, this is exactly what we've been saying all these years. If we don't get healthy food, adequate food, and food that families can easily access to their children and the elderly, then this is what was going to happen. And many of us know that because of the pandemic, so many whose immune system was not at where it should be were the ones that we lost in most cases. And again, it comes back to the Black and Brown community. But we have brought to light, but now I think it's time to talk about what are some of the things that we want to do that will make a difference. And if you don't mind, I just want to talk about, I believe that it's time I think a lot of voices are there now. We need to work together as one unit in so many different ways. We heard Linda, we have farms, you have farms, pantries, everyone, it's time for us to move together. And one of the things that I am aspired to do, and as the campaign against hunger, and this is something that we have put on the front of the burner because it has brought the reality to us that, hey, you've been doing a good work, but it is hunger, food insecurity, poor nutrition is still in our community. And I believe that it's time for us to look at where the weaknesses and where we can begin to formulate plans that are strong enough to bring changes. And some of the things that I found that has been a problem in our community is we're not communicating as leaders. We need to communicate together. Another thing that we need to look at is the fact that many of our small pantries, and you can equate to those, Lisa, is that even though they're distributing food, they don't have sometimes the infrastructure where the refrigeration is concerned, the freezer is concerned. Those things, it's not speaking to each other. It's not working. No need to drop off. We had Nourish New York. We had so many produce that came in from upstate. But the truth of the matter is, in the summer months when it's really needed, some people could not distribute it because there is a problem. So the campaign against hunger, we begin to look at this. We become to look at this as a problem that is in the Brooklyn community. And we are in dialogue with our board president, a lot of the council member, the mayor's office, had a personal conversation with the mayor himself, bringing these problems that this has to be fixed. The food bank is working, City Harvest is working, yes, but there's so much they can do from where they are located. They have a 50-foot trailer, it comes in, but there are other things that we must do. So we're looking at solution to some of these problems. I don't want to take up the time talking. It's not fair.
No, that's good. You went right into what I wanted to talk about because you, Dr. Samuels, had mentioned, this is a neighborhood design, right? Ms. Linda, you talked about its deliberate act of power and force, right? So delving right into food justice or food injustice, I think is important. It makes me think about when people say, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go, make your life and make it work. What if you have no boots, let alone the straps, right? So that has always bothered me tremendously. And in the same way where small organizations, small but mighty organizations, are having to be creative and figure out ways to respond to this issue for a situation that you did not create. And so where do we go from here, right? And Dr. Samuels, you mentioned talking to the borough president talking with the mayor's office, partnering with people, but there's an underlying something, a bunch of somethings that's structural that is causing us to be here. And anything else in the interim, while necessary, so don't get me wrong into thinking that none of this isn't needed, because it's needed, right? For emergency situations. But when emergency situations become the way of life, that's a problem, right? People that have been having to rely on a soup kitchen and food pantry should not be their primary source of food for a long extended period of time. So you talked about even the types of food that come in. When I was at Food Bank, there was a big push for milk, and that's great. Milk is important, but in a lot of communities of color, there's a lactose intolerance. And so, it's also just being understanding and knowledgeable about what communities need. It makes it difficult to move certain products and resources where there are some people who think, well, it's there, so you should take it if you're hungry. That's not okay. I think you need to be respectful of what people
Cultural
need.
differences.
All the cultural differences, what they need, what they should have access to, especially when this is structural and a lot of these things are band-aids, right? So I do want to go a little bit deeper on the food justice conversation. What are some things, if you're just a person listening in on this call, and some of this data can be overwhelming, right? You think, man, 52 million here, 18 million children, what can I do? I never want anyone to think there isn't a thing that they can do, because if everyone thought, well, there's nothing I can do, then nothing would ever get done, right? When we talk about food justice, what are some things that people can educate themselves on in order to be more involved with this particular issue, and increase the knowledge of others who may not see this for what it really is? It's not just hunger because it's hunger and people are out of work and they should just go find a job. It's not that cut and dry. What are some of the things that we can do? We can mobilize. This is for either one of you.
Linda, you want to go? Because I just...
When I worked as a filmmaker, and would provide feedback on the films of other filmmakers. And I worked as a documentary filmmaker, so to provide context. One of the things that I found myself saying, especially the filmmakers that were making documentaries about people who weren't like themselves, was that if you can't see your reflection in the eyes of the people you're filming, you need to turn off your camera. And I think that's something we've gotten into as a society of people, where we are more involved with distinguishing ourselves from others than being able to see ourselves in each other. And what I mean by that is all human experience is human experience. We all experience joy and disappointment. We experience achievement and failure. We all experience that, but somehow we compartmentalize it, put in little boxes and say, this is how I do it, you do it differently. I think the first thing you got to do is realize, just as you eat your food, you can also be someone who does not have the access, the money, the ability to afford food. And then you start to communicate or connect on that human level. It is just as possible for you as it is for anyone else to be in that state. And start to think from there, start to think from that heart is the first thing I think everyone has to do. And when you start to think from that heart, you'll know what's best for you and your lifestyle and your ability. Do I volunteer and become closer to folks in the community, understand that, and decide that I want to build on that and do something else, start something, or get involved in some other way? Do you do it through, donating $5 a month to a nonprofit or nonprofits that you feel are doing work that's aligned with where your heart is? There are so many strategies that are necessary. There are so many approaches and methods of getting this done that are necessary to solve the problem. It's not one way or another way. We choose to grow food. We choose to use the resources within the community to make that food accessible and affordable. And then we work with medical providers as partners, where their doctors are prescribing fresh vegetables as part of the patient treatment plan. So that this notion that food is something like Haagen-Dazs vanilla ice cream on my tongue on a Friday night, that's not what food is for. Food is to fuel, to nutrition your body, and to like shift people's whole mindset around that, and to get support from whoever and wherever in the community, from the churches to medical providers and et cetera, to support people eating more fresh, healthy food, along with just the necessities of just eating every day, which is what COVID has made us closer to. But like Dr. Samuel said, you know, this is a problem that's always been around. It's now in the news, so we're more sensitive to it. Let it not be in the news. Let your heart drive you.
It makes me think of, as working at Food Bank for so many years, you know, we always saw an uptick in donations, in volunteer requests right around Thanksgiving, right around Christmas, because that's when the other time that it is at the forefront of people's minds, and people want to be philanthropic and donate their time when, you know, people are hungry every single day. So I think it's finding times beyond the holidays to give of yourselves, to figure out how you can support your community-based organization, because they are important in terms of the day-to-day emergency situations. But if I can shift us a little bit to just talking about policies, according to a recent article that I read, the United States is facing a shortage of up to 8 billion meals in the next year, billion, as a result of the rise in hunger given the pandemic. The article stated that exactly this. It's likely that food banks and charities will be unable to accommodate the increasing demand. You think? I think it's more than safe to say, having worked at a food bank, and I think you both would agree, that it's not just likely, that it's not possible. It's just too much to ask of a charity to fill that kind of a gap. The article went on to state that Feeding America and many other advocates against hunger have advocated for the federal government to expand access to food stamps to offset the support provided by charities. And I think this is really important. Their analysis found that a 15% increase in SNAP benefits, which is what they've been asking for, in the next 12 months will reduce need by 4 billion pounds. And just to put that in some context, Food Bank for New York City provides an average of 70 million pounds of food annually. So if you think a change, 15% in SNAP benefits, and then over the next year, could reduce that need by 4 billion, doesn't that make more sense than expecting a charity, a food bank, to fill that gap when on average, there's but so much a food bank can do or a charity can do, and Food Bank for New York City can do 70 million pounds. And that's not small, that's nothing to sneeze at, but it's not possible to fill the gap, especially at the pace that's required. So I'm just wondering, from both of your perspectives, are there, aside from SNAP, or you can talk more about SNAP, are there other policies out there that people who want to get involved should be tracking, should be paying attention to, should be advocating for, should be pushing their elected officials to move on, to deal with what we're seeing here?
The numbers are unbelievable that you have just mentioned to us, but the reality is, I foresee that it is true that what's going to happen. The numbers are not far-fetched. I don't think they're taking it out of a hat, because when we look at what happened in the last 6 months, how many thousands, millions of people are unemployed, and how many have come on the food line. 75% of those we served during the pandemic was new to a pantry line. And many of those will not return to work based on what we're seeing in our community. We're looking at New York City on a whole. So many businesses have closed down, and it still seems like so many more will close down if there's a resurgence continues the way the uptick that we are seeing. And so SNAP, as everyone knows, is the first line of defense when it comes to hunger. And a lot of energy and advocacy needs to be there. We have been opening our voices, we've been doing what, but I believe that as small as that percent might look, the impact, the increase that it will bring, the amount of food that it will bring into homes. But then we look at also the program. We know we have EFAP and we have TFAP. That also, those programs also needs a voice there because they make a difference. EFAP right now, we're looking at, there might be changes in how it distributes its food, but EFAP is in our city is effective if we can get if it can get the funding it needs. So EFAP is another way to go. Simply, I think now for those of us that can, EFAP, TFAP, and even our EITC, as you know, that program might seem taxes, earned income tax credit, to many of us might say, okay, well, someone is getting their tax return. But we have proven during your tenure at the food bank, if the person, the family is learning how to budget, it makes such a big difference in food insecurity. So we can't push that under the rug. I believe that's another area that we need to get involved to make sure that that continues. But with all the tax credit we've been hearing and changes that we've been hearing from Washington, it makes us wonder, how can we continue to combat food insecurity as it is? We need to get up and write letters. Those many get up. Let's get letters to the editors. Let's continue to stay in the face of our electoral officials, because as Lisa says, when we look at it, as soon as Thanksgiving / a little over to Christmas is over, it's like hunger is missing. And when I say missing, it's gone. We don't see it again until maybe July. And January, the next 6 months, programs, families are desperately in need, and no one remembers us. During the winter months, I can tell you, it's the worst time to fundraise, but the lines are longer because the heating bills are more, and the seniors are hungry, and the children are hungry, and people are getting homeless, and the situation is grave even then. But more people like the touchy feeling, it's Thanksgiving, I want to know I gave a family a turkey. Oh, we appreciate that too. We're not kicking that. Volunteerism is another thing that plunges downhill. And so I think as, I don't know why we are in this food business, but I tell you, those of us who are CBOs that are working in this space, it is a hard space. I'm telling you, it takes a COVID-19 for people to realize that we're there. It takes a Sandy to bring, it should not be. It should be the realization that somebody, or there's a group right now that is hungry. Every minute of the day, someone across the world, across the nation, across our city, in our boroughs, in our home, in our communities, in our home, need food.
Right. And hunger doesn't just look one way. I think
No.
for a long time, people, think of a homeless person, it can be someone who goes to work every single day who is food insecure. It can be your child's classmates who's in school every day, and now with COVID, and luckily they found a way to distribute meals, but those are meals that are missing when school is closed. And hunger doesn't have one face. And so, it takes a pandemic to bring awareness to the fact that, hunger impacts everyone. And a lot of us can be on the precipice of being in a situation that can change everything for us. And that's important to note. I want to go to the chat because I see a couple of comments and one question. This one is from Katarina. Pelosi again decided not to accept the most recent 1.8 trillion stimulus offer yesterday. Republicans and Democrats continue to argue political viewpoints on a topic most apolitical, hunger. In light of the continued delay in aid from the federal government, it continues to be that local efforts are the core of feeding food insecure families. Being a part of the emergency food system and using a community-based approach to support insecure families, does it frustrate you to see housing and healthcare costs increasing for food insecure families you serve? Do you ever feel like it's a Band-Aid? We talked about that a little bit, but is there more that you want to say in response to that question, either of you?
I definitely don't wake up every day thinking that what we're doing is a Band-Aid. I don't. I look at it as every day as an opportunity to contribute to the solutions that are sustainable, that ensure no one goes hungry in the world. And we do that, like I said, at Project Eats. One strategy is to create complete food systems in communities throughout a city, so that you're growing the food, you're producing small scale manufacturing products and jobs, both in farming. We also hire community residents to work our farms and to produce products. It's making food accessible, affordable, creating job and career opportunities at the same time. It's creating a level of independence on something that is necessary for all of us, that breaks the dependency that we're in now, where we can only get food if we buy it. How about if we do it ourselves, small scale, on communities everywhere? That's just Project Eats' strategy. There are a whole bunch of strategies, but yeah, that's one that I think is sustainable. It's something we human beings used to do. We can borrow on the past to create a future that's sustainable for all of us.
For me, there is still a definite increase. I don't know if Band-Aid is like the correct word, but of course, based on the vast amount of needs I understand why it would be referred to. Do you ever feel like it's like a Band-Aid? Sometimes I do, but I know what I do see, though, why I'm not holding to the Band-Aid theory is because so many have moved towards assisting this project, looking towards food insecurity more. There is a conversation has begun. And it is us, in years, it took years for it to come to light that this is real, and it's every person is one paycheck away, just about, in our community, one paycheck away from the pantry line. We saw that. I know it. I've heard it from architects. I've heard it from individuals with college degrees that have said, I never dreamt this was possible. So we know that. But now that we have started a conversation, I've said this before, I am optimistic that if we continue to advocate the way we are, open our mouths, use the strategy, let's work as a unit, using technology, because it's a part of what should be. There should be technology in our food business, so much so that we are talking to each other, where we can get the deep pocket areas of poverty, where somewhat an area that has been left behind, we can at least address that need. That needs to be looked at. Also, that we continue to work with all the policy makers. Don't leave anyone off the table. Everyone should be accountable to make sure that families, all the constituents in their community have access to food. What Linda talked about, growing, as much as we are, food justice is important. The food justice movement growing. I come from an island where everybody grew in their backyard. That's how we started a farm in 2008. Everybody grew something in their backyard, to be able to grow and share. And so that is not impossible. It does not finish, it does not take care of all the problems, but it's a part. And I think if each one of us do a little, whether it's through the growing, through the growing of food, in certain areas where we can grow on the rooftop, wherever, that is important. That can help, that can change things. But also SNAP needs to be increased. I can't say it anymore. And all the red tapes about SNAP needs to be removed. There's too many. Someone can be $1 away from support. It's just simple as that. And that's heartrending when you have so many kids that are going to bed hungry. Also looking at community, they're here. I was an immigrant years ago. I know what it feels like. I have gone through, and I guess maybe that's why I'm so passionate about what I do. I have received a week check, and I remember being turned back from the cashier line how many times to get the right cheese. You don't have the right cheese in your cart. You don't have the right milk. The embarrassment of just having a week check. It was so embarrassing to me. I felt so degraded there. And these are some of the things that we as a community now, or as an organization, have to fight against. Families should not feel uncomfortable about getting help from the government. We should not, there shouldn't be, the stigma needs to be removed. So the conversation has started, Lisa. To me, it has started. I think we are a little beyond the Band-Aid. And I think if this generation, and we can empower the generation to come to understand this is a right, and this continuous food insecurity, food injustice needs to stop. We need to bring our children in awareness that this needs to change, and build a generation now that will advocate and will continue until it's eradicated. And that's the only way it can go.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. I see that we've come up on the hour, but I first of all, thank you both. Your knowledge, your perspective is something that's absolutely needed. You know, as someone who sometimes does feel that it can feel like a Band-Aid. I appreciate the perspective that, because I do believe this, the fact that I worked on these issues for over 8 years, and that now that I'm no longer at Food Bank for New York City, that I still want to talk about it, because I think it's important to talk about it, indicates that, you know, it is not a Band-Aid. And I think it's about the collective effort of everyone to do whatever it is that you do that can make a difference. And so the perspective you brought today, I think, is very important for everyone who's on this call. And I hope that everyone has been enriched by that. I just want to close by saying, and then I have a couple of comments on there that I want to get to, and then we'll end it, is that, you know, food is something that brings all of us together. It sustains us, it fuels us. When it's healthy and nutritious, it fortifies us. And when it's accessible, and thanks to the work that both you, Dr. Samuels, and Linda O'Brien are doing, because we can have a hand in it, it liberates us. And I think that's important for us to know and understand. So we have a comment from Professor Emick: awareness is the first step. This is a call to action. It absolutely is, Bill. And then from our youngest viewer, Sophia, she is 8.5. That half is very important, I know that. Thank you for letting me sit in on the talk. We can't just sit and look. We need to come up with the best strategies to end food insecurity. The wisdom of the youth. Thank you for that, Sophia. Very wise indeed.
Thank you. I'll pass it on. She had to go to class.
Okay. But I think this is all the time that we have, but I want to thank you, Dr. Emick, Professor Emick, Valerie, Jeremy, Dr. Samuels, Ms. Linda O'Brien. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. Obviously, we can talk for a long time about all of this, but we hope that we whet your appetite enough to get involved in some way. Please look at your local community-based programs, support the Campaign Against Hunger, support Project Eats. Collectively, we can make an impact to what may seem like an overwhelming issue. We can eradicate hunger. We really can, if we do it together.
Thank you so much to all three of you. And I think this is a topic that certainly deserves a follow-up. So maybe we'll have you back for part 2 if you guys are willing.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.